Let's go back counting.
Sorry? Thank you.
Good morning, ACITA members and guests. We'll be starting shortly. We're just waiting for more members to join. We've had a very, very good response, but we're just making sure that everyone's able to join, and we'll be starting shortly. Thank you. Good morning, ACITA members and guests. I'd like to hand you over to Des Hiscock, the Director General, who will introduce today's speaker and explain the webinar etiquette. And hopefully you will all put through a whole raft of questions which we can put to Koja. And again, thank you very much for joining us. Des, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Kevin, I see I was trying to put my video on, but you started it. If anyone wants to see me, you're going to have to put my video on. Yeah, if you could do that. Otherwise, guys, you're just going to have to listen to me. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year to you, and welcome to ACITA's first event of 2021. And I suppose this is the first event with the UK being outside the European Union. I suppose we all thought Brexit would never happen, but it has. We expected significant disruption at the borders, but I think a mix of sort of price stockpiling and decreased demand resulting from COVID has seriously, reduced that impact that we expected, and things have not been as bad as I think we all envisaged them to be. It has, however, not been a smooth sailing. In absence of clarity of practice, I mean, there have been significant delays in places like Dublin, on the French border. Our border operating model was only published on late on New Year's Eve, which has made it all sort of very interesting. But what we are hoping to address in this session is trying to get a bit of clarity about the new trading arrangements that now exist between the UK and the EU. We've had some really strange reactions, sort of in chatting to a couple of members. There's this sudden clamoring of people trying to sort of change their Incoterms to move responsibility around onto their suppliers or their buyers, depending on whether they're sort of importing or exporting. And I think it's very important that we get feedback from you guys as to what you are struggling with, so that we can, sort of frame and grab the subject matters for the sessions that are most important to you. I will not be with you throughout the whole session today. It's been recorded, so I'll be watching it tonight. But we are very lucky to have an expert in the field, Collier Mendel, that you've all sort of heard chat on the subject before. He'll be taking you through a 90-minute presentation. Kevin will be coordinating the questions. The sessions will run on the exact same basis as the previous sessions. Please put your questions in the in the chat box or in the question facility available, and Kevin will put those questions through to Collier either during the session or after the session, depending on how relevant the question is to the subject material at the time. So from my point of view, I mean, again, a happy new year. Enjoy the session, and I suppose without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Collier.
Yeah, thanks, Des. You hear me well still, right?
I hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Then, yeah, thank you for the introductory words, Des, and for having me on this subject. And as you said, the main idea would be really looking into the material conditions of origin under the new agreement we could follow in social networks, but also in the UK press, that there apparently are certain misunderstandings or misconceptions around. Just as an introductory remark, of course, also we in mainland Europe have heard about certain issues. Des has also mentioned briefly. So here we got already some prepared question we'll look into. You can see my screen now, right? Sorry, Kevin, you see my screen, right? Okay, I'll continue, but I'll be happy for a feedback whether you can really see my screen. Okay, so we've heard about certain disruptions, and as Des said, maybe both the New Year period as well as the Corona situation have an impact, a positive one here indeed, one of the few positive ones indeed. However, we heard about the Percy Pigs story of Marks and Spencer, which was indeed related to rules of origin, whilst I would say this is rather a supply chain problem than a rules of origin problem, but we look into this. This is similar to some questions which have been handed in before. We've heard about Fortnum and Manson seizing their EU shipments. Here I think it's rather a VAT issue from what I've heard, and we of course heard about certain problems in the relation to Northern Ireland. But looking on that, I'd say those things which have been reported have been less related to rules of origin than to, again, supply chain and customs issues. The one I really found the most sad was those of the Scottish exporters of seafood, who now have a problem to bring their very time-critical goods in the appropriate time frame to the European market, and really face issues here. But okay, then let's go into our subject. Kevin, if there was an issue in seeing my screen or hearing me, I rely on you telling me, right?
Everything is perfect, Kojo. Thank you.
Except the echo. Okay, cool. Thank you. Good. We'll talk about the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, and especially the challenges in the application of the rules of origin, because there are challenges, whilst my thesis was what has been reported so far maybe is not a direct rules of origin implication, but we'll see. We'll talk about the general rules of origin. We talk about the product-specific rules. We can also do some examples together if you would like to. Also using the new check tool of the IT, which I've introduced in December to you. And we'll of course speak about documentation requirements and a practical approach to application. Kevin will safeguard that when I fall short on one of my announcements and would simply miss to address something I've promised to address, he'll kick in and remind me to do so. And again, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and those which directly relate to the subject matter I'm presenting, I'll try to deal with within the presentation, while the more general ones and examples we should do afterwards. But I'm of course curious for and happy to hear about your questions, because it's a changing time, and for the time being, not everything is clear and settled. And I think we can really take the opportunity to learn from each other and from well, our problems, which may be common problems, and if they are individual problems, we may potentially solve them together. So eventually a deal. When I was asked in December, I think I said I'm skeptical about the deal, and said the only possibility is that Boris and Ursula will agree on that on high level, and then actually ask their teams to get things done. As it turned out, they have been indeed fairer than expected, because it wouldn't be possible to finalize everything then so quickly, if not the famous 90 somewhat percent have been ready before. The critical items in the end indeed was, as we discussed previously, the level playing field. So rules and standards, where the UK indeed wanted to gain new sovereignty. It was dispute settlement, which came in with a specific relevance also thanks to the internal market bill, which was then revised as part of the overall agreement, as we also had some joint decisions on Northern Ireland only on 17th of December, where the committee met and decided some critical questions, as for instance on goods in goods at risk. So this also was kind of a sign that there would be agreement. The UK announcing it on the 23rd then finally resulted in that the EU's fish counting method was taken, which was the very reason why the Prime Minister's press conference had to be rescheduled from 8 in the morning to, I think, 4 in the afternoon, as the parties has counted the fish differently. And just as a slight remark here, if they hadn't fought for any single fish separately, they would maybe have more time for operators to prepare themselves. But anyway, we are all happy that there is a deal, whilst, and I will also show this in a few practical insights, and we'll give you the links afterwards. It's really worthwhile to look into how the other side comments on the deal. I've of course taken note of everything which was published, or let's say a large amount of the relevant stuff published in the UK, but I also regularly look into what the EU publishes, and the tone is different here. So the approval by the UK Parliament was on 30th December. I think the Queen signed on 31st, so really a last minute thing. The provisional application is as of 1st January 21. Provisional because the EU Parliament couldn't ratify it on time. It is, however, and this is also noteworthy, it's what we call an EU only agreement. So it's not mixed competencies. So unlike CETA, which still is on the way through the 40 somewhat parliaments of the EU, including the regional one in Wallonia, in Belgium, there is only the need for the ratification through the EU Parliament, which is not at question. So, of course, there is criticism from the parliamentarians in the EU too, similar to those of the opposition in the UK, saying having only a few days for those 1,264 pages, I think, in the English version, is not much time. well, but I think the deal as such won't be endangered by this, and Parliament will give its consent with maybe some critical comments. One remark here. I, by the way, indeed read it following the UK newspapers picture with Boris and the Christmas present. I read it on Christmas, but of course not the 46 pages, but those which are relevant for foreign trade. And this is especially what we find in part 2, trade, transport, fisheries, and other arrangements, and here the trade in goods part. The agreement does also regulate on further fields. We do have law enforcement and judicial cooperation. We do have thematic cooperation on health and cybersecurity. We've got the participation in union programs where I think there was a sad command by the concerned that the UK wouldn't continue to stay in the Erasmus program, but does stay in some other programs. And we've got the dispute settlement and horizontal provisions. We'll directly turn to the trading goods and origin now. This was just giving the more general framework overview. It is interesting, very briefly, to mention what is not in. The EU would have liked to also agree on a more fostered partnership in foreign politics and sanctions and so on, but the UK here didn't want it to consent on this because of its newly gained sovereignty, and moreover, the UK was seeking more arrangements on the financial market, which now becomes, because it's not regulated here, becomes subject to more unilateral acceptance of equivalence by the EU side. So it is not still absolutely clear what for the finance market in London will be the final playing field in the EU. So both parties would have liked to see more in, but this is the compromise we see here. Just one remark here, the part 6, the dispute settlement and horizontal provisions. This has a trade notion or a connection to trade, cause as Boris said in the press conference in this afternoon, indeed the general condition of tariff and quota-free access is subject to the potential application of tariff measures when disputes cannot be amicably settled, which is a provision which the EU has introduced to say if the EU would deem the UK to deviate from the standards which have been set as a common basis, and it would see the level playing field hampered by this, the EU indeed could introduce duties again, and the parties may also introduce duties on fish, vice versa, if this part of the agreement isn't implemented in an amicable way. So we don't have any duties, we don't have tariff quotas, but we have the theoretical threat. Of course, this is a provision which is relating to both parties. So theoretically, also the UK can bring this up, but the suspicion is that the UK would rather deviate from the EU standards than the other way around. So let's see. However, for the time being, indeed, and now really going into trade in goods and origin, it's part 2, title 1, trade in goods, with the chapter 1, national treatment and market access for goods, which has some, I'd recommend to read the trade in goods part in full. It's 70 or 80 pages. That's really doable, with a specific focus on chapter 1, which is the prohibition to apply duties and tariff rate quotas, and general conditions for market access of goods, and especially chapter 2, routes of origin, which goes along with a number of annexes. There is a specific annex with introductory notes to the product-specific rules of origin. I've abbreviated it here. You call them either PSRO or just PSR, product-specific rules. There is a specific annex containing those PSRO. And we've got an additional annex to this annex, so it's 2A on origin quotas and alternative rules to the PSRO for, as you may know, canned tuna and aluminium. We also have transitional rules in 2B for accumulators and electronic vehicles, which is thanks to the common initiative of EU and UK to support an industry for electric vehicles. We've got a supplier's declaration sample in Annex OREX 3, which, by the way, really led to a couple of misunderstandings even here in Germany and in the EU, because people thought this was the supplier's declaration for cross-border declarations under this, this was the general declaration when claiming origin. No, it's a specific one for full cumulation. The normal declaration, so to say, or the standard declaration is the statement on origin, but we will have a look on both, of course. Okay, so basic principles of trading goods. As I said before, all goods imported are free of tariffs and quotas in both parties. So no duties at all if the product is originating in the other party. And this is a condition which may have not been fully understood by all parties concerned, because this zero tariff, zero quotas does only apply to goods which originate in the other party, which is also an important emphasis here. It does not relate to any third country goods, or, just to say it here before, to goods of the own party. There is, however, no difference in the actual customs treatment of goods. All declarations are required, inclusively the security declarations. We don't have a corresponding agreement on a waiver here, like we do have, for instance, for Switzerland and Norway. This may come later, but I think parties haven't agreed yet on the security environment, which also, again, has to do with the newly gained sovereignty. There is especially no relaxation in customs clearance and declarations. Of course, the UK does unilaterally with its border operating model and the phasing in of controls on 1st of Jan, 1st of April, and 1st of July. Des has mentioned this. However, on the EU side, we don't have a phasing in, and there is no relaxation at all. This chapter just reads as a general common, confirmation that the parties won't treat them appropriately like under WTO and in a partnership, but however, not specifically relaxed. I think it is clear to everybody in the audience that internal taxation has nothing to do with preferences. We just heard about some misinterpretations that the origin could also waive taxation. That's of course nonsense. Internal taxation or national treatments in internal taxation just means goods of the UK are treated in Germany or every other member state like goods of this member state. So you pay the normal German VAT and the normal German excise taxes, whilst goods exported from the EU, let's say Germany, to the UK will just fall under the normal UK VAT and UK excise regulations. Just bear in mind that for Northern Ireland, this is different because for goods, it remains within the tax area of the EU, or at least falls under the tax regulations of the EU, only for goods, not for services. So in a nutshell, the actual benefit is, so I could say earlier, just there is some kind of a specific mutual recognition. This is of the AEO status. UK AEOs are correspondingly recognized in the EU and vice versa. However, this only leads us to the debate whether the actual advantages for being an AEO are sufficient in comparison with the actual efforts to acquire and maintain the status. We won't go into this. It's just said that UK AEOs may have the advantages of AEOs in the EU, as they may be dealt with or may be recognized as going along with a lower risk. But again, the actual advantages, let's say neutral, are still questioned by industry. To finalize my sentence, I already began. In a nutshell, the actual benefit is in trading goods related to the preferential margin. This is absolutely important. The preferential margin usually is the difference between the applied MFN rate and the preferential rate. In agreements where you do have dismantling schedules, it may be that the applied MFN rate is 5%, the preferential rate is 10%. The preferential rate is 5%. Then you have a preferential margin of 5%. So you have to subtract the preferential rate from the MFN rate to get the margin. In the EU-UK case, it's easier because the preferential rate always is 0. So you just have to look onto the MFN rate, and the MFN rate is identical with the preferential margin. The preferential margin is of utmost importance. If the duty rate is 0, the preferential margin is 0. And you don't have to go into the whole thing of origin unless your client or importer wants you to do so because he wants to accumulate later on. And when you do have a preferential margin of, let's say, 14%, this is absolutely different to a preferential margin of 1 or 2%, which may make it questionable whether the efforts for generating and proving origin are really worthwhile. But this, however, before somebody writes this, I say it, this of course depends on the actual amount of goods. If you sell for millions and millions, a percent is, maybe a decisive criterion, whilst if you only have a shipment of £1,000, you may not want to save this percent because the saving is much more expensive. So we already started talking about the tariffs. Where do I find these tariffs? I think you've been working with the UK trade tariff so far. When you now look into EU rates, I recommend you to either directly work, we'll have a look into this together, with a EU TARIC website, which is a dedicated one of DG TaxUD, the EU Director General, which is responsible, and it shows it on EU level. As you may know, of course, Germany has its own national tariff website in German, of course, but all national websites, including the one of Lithuania and Bulgaria, do reflect the TARIC. They just do add the national measures. And the Germans, as you know, Germans tend to be very specific or special. Germans add indeed an 11th digit for the codification of national measures, but the 10-digit level in Germany, of course, is completely identical to the EU level, and all actual rates levied in Germany are absolutely identical to the EU rate. So you can look into the EU TARIC. And in the last point here, I just wanted to recall the check tool I've introduced last time, the new DIT tool, which is the successor of the former MADB, which in the meantime has become A2M in the EU. The tool on all kind of foreign trade measures on duties, taxes, and procedures and formalities. And in Czech, you do have a simplified view on the EU TARIC, so it's easier to use. And you also see the corresponding PSRO directly on the level of the end line. So you have everything in one view, we'll have a common look into it. Kevin will remind me. And in Czech, of course, you also have the very same information for all of the other trade agreements of the UK, where the UK in the meantime has almost completed its network with the latest ones with Mexico and Turkey, for instance. The UK tariffs are now given in the UK global tariff, as you know, which now really shows the UK tariff, which is simplified, and the rates are usually lower. You have to bear this in mind when you look at the preferential margin. It may be 1 or 2% lower than actually the EU rate, and the UK has gotten rid of some historic tariff constructions in the mersing of rates in the agricultural sector. So UK doesn't have mersing anymore. I think that's not the worst thing. And what is very important, as we will later on see, that a classification is key to rules of origin. The nomenclatures of the EU and the UK remain the same, at least for a transitional period of half a year. Anyway, the 6-digit level, which is based on the harmonized system, will remain the same, but the UK said it would follow the EU's tariff nomenclature for at least half a year, so till summer this year, and then even further on it shall remain quite similar. So for the time being, the combined nomenclature of the EU, which is 8 digits, and the EU tariff nomenclature of 10 digits are correspondingly reflected in the UK global tariff. So you can just exchange tariff numbers or tariff items between UK and the EU freely, which you must not do with other countries because the 10-digit number here may just be a false friend. So don't do this with the US. A US 10-digit number may or will most probably mean something different, as harmonization here only is on the 6-digit level. Okay. Now we go directly into origin. So we just recall we have between EU and UK no tariffs, no tariff quotas, just origin quotas. We'll have a look on this later on. This actual advantage of paying no tariffs is exclusively applied to originating products. Originating product means the product has been produced in one of the party in a way that it has, sometimes it's called, I don't like it, but I just say it, it's called the economic nationality of the product. You can also say the product on a rule-based or in a rule-based framework can be related to the economy of one party. So you can say this good is originating in the UK because it has been produced in the UK or in the EU. It is not a good which is from China or Switzerland, and thus non-originating in the sense of the agreement. Very important remark here, just bear in mind, in non-preferential origin, every product always will have an origin. It may be hard to determine in certain cases, but no product without a non-preferential origin. As regards preferential origin, products may have no preferential origin at all, or they may have even different preferential origin, meaning they do fulfill the criteria of different agreements. But when there is a diagonal accumulation between different countries, this origin is only applicable within the framework of one agreement, meaning in the territory of the agreement. And the territory of this agreement here clearly is the EU 27 and the UK, where Northern Ireland again comes in as, from a preferential perspective, part of the UK. So that goods from Northern Ireland, also we don't have a border to the Republic, are still originating in the UK and not originating in the EU. So the general principles of origin are products need to be either wholly obtained. This only is possible for products which are really sourced from the ground, so to say. It's mainly in agriculture that you do have products directly harvested or obtained from the soil, also in mining and so on. Usually with more complex products, they won't be wholly obtained anymore, but they may be, and that's the second criterion, exclusively produced from material which originates in one party, as it says. So this means in practice, if you do have 3 materials and you have 3 supplier declarations from them, I mean the domestic ones here, then you do produce your product from 3 different materials, which however all are originating. This means you don't have to consult the PSRO anymore because, and I should have said this before, if your products are wholly obtained, which is not that relevant for industry, you don't look up the PSR. You have origin ready. And also, if your products are exclusively produced from material originating just in one party, then, so my case, 3 suppliers declarations saying it's materials with UK origin, you combine the 3 materials in more than a minimal operation, then you will have an UK originating good without the need to consult the actual PSRO. If you do, however, incorporate non-origin materials, then those need to be in compliance with the product-specific origin. You have to, roots of origin, you have to look up the corresponding annex and search for your product there, or for your, search for your non-origin material to see whether it is used in compliance with the product-specific roots of origin. I'm following a little the structure of the text of the, well, we don't have, as I said before, we don't have an origin protocol here. Huh? It's just the corresponding chapter on origin we do have in the agreement text, which then links to the annexes. In classical agreements, we do have a origin protocol, which usually starts with the general rules, and you have the introductory remarks to the list rules, and then you have the list rules of the PSRO. Here it's chapter 2 in conjunction with the annexes. So the corresponding article we are talking about here, it's article 3, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, general requirements, does also introduce here directly the roll-up principle. The roll-up principle means the following. It's important to have this in mind. When you do produce a frame for a bicycle from tubing, let's say aluminium tubing, the aluminium tubing is sourced from a third country. However, in building the frame then fulfills the product-specific rule and has become a UK originating product. You may use this frame in the production of the entire bicycles with the wheels and all the other stuff you have to put on the frame. This means any kind of intermediate product, the rule is it has to be in a state that it could be sold. Also, you don't sell it, but you just use it for your own purposes, becomes a corresponding originating product, and you don't have to deal or calculate with, in my example, with the actual cost of the tubing, for instance, because you already made a frame, the frame is EU originating, and like you could then, if you sold the frame to another party, you could make out a supplier's declaration for it, where you would just say the frame is originating, and the party would use it as an originating product, like in our second line here, exclusively produced from material originating. You may use it in your own production in this way. So this is a roll-up principle. It's important to bear it in mind, so that you don't calculate with non-origin materials. You don't have to calculate with anymore, because the intermediate product has become originating already. We do have a principle of territoriality, I said, which is the 27 member states and the UK. and we have no exception to the principle of territoriality. This is important if you remember, for instance, the pan-Euro meat rules the UK was applying together with the EU, and today also has taken over certain agreements like with Switzerland or so. These agreements do contain an exception. This means that up to 10% of operations may be done in a third country. This is not possible. So there is no exception to the principle of territoriality. This means all production with no interruption has to be carried out in the EU or the UK. Of course, the goods may cross borders then with the appropriate documentation and the appropriate originating status. And it absolutely does not have to be in only one company or one plant, but it must not leave the territory. We do have the principle of bilateral cumulation, which is usual for FTAs, and we have a little unusual, but being present in the European Economic Area and the EU agreements with the Maghreb states, we now have full cumulation. We don't have any diagonal cumulation. So no cumulation, for instance, with Swiss materials is foreseen under this agreement. So, and this slide here implicitly also answers questions Kevin was so kind to collect and hand in beforehand. We'll also address them explicitly later on, but maybe you will see that the answer from a regulatory perspective already is in here. Let's look on cumulation. And for instance, bearing in mind the PercyPIX example. So in bilateral cumulation, products originating in one party, let's say the EU, are considered originating in the other party, the UK, if they are used as materials in the production of other products in the other party, the UK. So again, an EU originating product may be considered as UK originating if it is used in the production as a material in the production of another product in the UK. If it is not used as a material in production, it can't be used as an EU originating good towards further shipments under the agreement. This is the specification of this line here. So, sorry, I can't highlight it here. Exclusively produced from materials originating in one party also includes materials of the other parties, provided they are used for production of other products in the party. And we do have a prerequisite here also. This is that any minimal operations, which is called in the TCA insufficient production, does not allow for the application of bilateral cumulation. So practically, if you would, so the Marks and Spencer story in the moment is that PercyPIX are produced in Germany actually by the famous German company Haribo, which does our Gummibärchen, by the way. And if I got it right, it is shipped to the UK as a ready-made product. It does contain the sweets in a plastic package. If you now would import the sweets to the UK and only pack them there into a UK package, which may even work in other environments, then you wouldn't fulfill here the rule of the minimal operation, and it still would have EU origin, and there is no preference, as I write at the bottom. And this is a general rule for all trade agreements of the EU and the most other trade agreements. There is no preferential treatment for the own origin in a party. This means when you do import goods of EU origin to the EU, they are a third country product technically, because they've lost their union status, and as non-union goods they just fall under our normal tariff rates. Also, they may have been originating in the EU. However, there's no preference for EU origin in the EU, and the same, by the way, applies to the UK. There are, like always in life, exceptions proving the rule. For the EU-Switzerland FTA, because of some historical regulations which have been taken over, there is a rule that re-imported products of the EU from Switzerland are subject to a preferential treatment, and we also find this rule in CETA. These are the only two agreements of the EU where we find the rule. I don't know if the UK has proposed it, but the UK, as we've talked about earlier, I think in November or so, had proposed a very relaxed origin article, which was going for all potential cumulation possibilities. Maybe this was overseen over that. However, it also would not, even if the UK proposal would have gone through, if I recall it correctly, it would not have helped Marks and Spencer here, because there is no production. It is just shipping an EU good to the UK and shipping it directly without manipulating it to the Republic of Ireland. This, by the way, usually has not been a problem under EU agreements, because if you just think about the EU-Chile or the UK-Chile agreement, you wouldn't usually bring goods to Chile to then re-export them to Ireland. And where we do have this situation in the EU, we particularly have it with Switzerland, where indeed EU goods may cross the border forth and back, however, then have to fulfill the rules of origin, but then there is a preference. So the specific case here is that in the supply chains of UK companies, it has been a very practical habit, let's call it like this, to import goods from the EU to the UK and distribute them to Ireland. However, if you customs clear them in the UK and basically bring them on the UK market to then export them to Ireland, you will have a double customs clearance and you won't have preferences anymore. So this definitely calls for either a direct transport between the EU and Ireland. I know the logistic implications, or a transit procedure T2 from the EU to Ireland, or a customs warehouse in the UK where the consignment is split and then distributed to its actual users in the UK or the ones in Ireland. So what led to certain misinterpretations, I said this before, is that we do have a supplier's declaration in Annex or Act 3. However, this is only relevant for the full cumulation we will now look on. Full cumulation means that production carried out in one party on non-originating materials may be considered in determining whether product is originating in the other party. As an example, you produce something in Germany and add a value which is not sufficient to make it originating in Germany, but you've added this value. Then the UK party only has to, or in the UK party, only the remaining value has to be added to reach the required local content, or to reduce the non-originating, the value of the non-originating materials under the threshold. So you can, in a way, combine operations in the UK and in the EU, although they have not, as such, led to originating status. However, then you have to communicate what you have done to the other side. I see you, Kevin. And communicating this means you have to use this cross-border supplier declaration of Annex 3. And this, depending on the rule, may mean that you have to communicate the value, and many companies don't like to do this. So this is we have the same with domestic suppliers declarations, which we do have with preferential and non-preferential origin. And as you may know, the ones with non-preferential origin are usually predominantly used for those cases where you don't have to communicate values, but just say what you've done on materials without giving business secrets to the other side. Kevin, you have a question?
I do, thank you. It sort of pertains to what we're talking about. In the Percy Pig example, using a customs warehouse, would you still have duty applied in Ireland?
If the goods are not released for free circulation in the EU, not for free circulation in the UK, and would remain under customs supervision, then it would be actually EU goods which are just transited to Ireland. So it's a transit operation. From an origin perspective, it is not that you have a preference for EU goods in Ireland. You just don't bring them into circulation into the UK. You do just a transit operation, which you do then interrupt for a customs warehouse in between. So you have to, in a way, you have to avoid free circulation or home use. So you have to arrange your customs procedures in a way that you basically just import a union good to to Ireland. So you have to retain union status. This is the most important finding here. Good question, Kevin. Of course, what makes the product duty free in Ireland, if it is an EU product, so in the Republic of Ireland, I have to say, what makes the good duty free in the Republic of Ireland is not that it is EU originating. There is no preference for EU goods in Ireland, not Republic of Ireland. You have to either export a UK originating good to Northern Ireland, to the Republic of Ireland, then you can claim the preference, zero duty, or you just transport an EU good to Ireland by preserving its union status, because it is not brought into free circulation in the UK, which means customs supervision. As soon as it loses its union status, it becomes a non-union good subject to duties in Ireland, and this is the Percy Pig example, unless you do a production in the UK where you obtain UK origin again. But if we look on Marcus and Spencer, they actually don't want to produce something. They just want to market goods originating from the EU in Ireland and would like to avoid the duties here. So they either have to ship the goods directly to Ireland using a transit procedure, or may just split the consignment, but then, and this is the most important point here, preserving the union status. Splitting of consignment under this agreement means something else. You may import UK goods into the EU, and then, or let's say, you may bring them to Switzerland and split the consignment even in Switzerland to Italy and to other countries. So splitting of consignments mean I can, in a third country, split my consignments. I think the only logical case would be Switzerland here, to retain their originating status. This is something different from retaining the union status. I think the critical point here, and I'm emphasize on this because the questions you have sent me, Kevin, were circling around this. We're in a way searching for opportunities to retain EU originating status when importing through the UK to Ireland. This, unfortunately, is not possible unless you really produce something in the UK. And here you also have to go beyond the minimal operations. This means even the idea of packing the Percy Pig sweets in the UK would not work out, because this would still be a minimal operation.
Thank you, Kojo. This sort of leads on to again, thank you for that question. It was from an anonymous person, but great question. It leads on, if the transport movement is interrupted, the UK cannot issue a T2.
Oh, sorry, no, I know that a direct transport under NCTS does not allow for this. This is clear. So the most easy solution indeed is to directly transit the goods to either not do a transit at all, directly move the goods from the EU to Ireland, to the Republic of Ireland. Then there is no issue at all. If you bring them over the UK, you have to use a transit procedure, or you have to then not in a common transit procedure. You have to, but I just said this as a theoretical option here. It may be that the questioner is right, that the actual efforts doing so are too high to be applicable in practice. So you have to retain union status by proving the commodity is the same. So this is, by the way, what you also do with return goods. So you actually have to prove the good has left the union and it has been re-entering the union without being manipulated in another territory outside the union. So here you also have to bring evidence of identity. And if it's just one party, there may be not a. So this is also important to know. In the case of returned goods, a good must not return to the same member state. You can import goods from Germany to the UK, and from a European customs territory perspective, return them into the Republic of Ireland. But then you have to prove the goods are the very same and they have not been manipulated. And this may involve documentation, which again is business sensitive. When the exporter in the EU and the importer in Ireland, in this case, are not related. The EU exporter may not want the Republic of Ireland imported to know about the export declaration and its features. So technically, so it is good that you insisted on this. I just wanted to in a way differentiate the options. Maybe as the questions circled around this, maybe again just as a enumeration for greater certainty. What are the options? Direct shipment to Ireland, Republic. When I say Ireland, let's say I mean the Republic. When I mean the northern part, I say Northern Ireland. So direct shipment to Ireland. Transit procedure T2 over the UK to Ireland. If the goods, for any reason whatsoever, have to remain for a certain time in the UK and the transit procedure is interrupted, then it must be in a way that the identity of the goods is secured and the non-manipulation can be proven. For practical supply chain arrangements, this, I suppose, will be too complex, but these are the options. The final option, and this is the one originally foreseen when we are looking into the protocol of origin here, is, however, that you do import EU goods for either consumption in the UK, home use, or for then further production in the UK, which then may be exported to the EU, but as an UK originating product, not as an EU originating product. This means you always have to fulfill the rules of origin as a whole. And if you only work with UK and EU originating products, you must always be beyond minimal operations. And this means you have to apply a production. So in the Persipix one, the real possibilities I see, they either produce it in the UK, or if they want to keep their German supplier, they should split up the supply chain, do one for the UK and one for Ireland. If somebody in the this is not easy here, huh? Because you really need to deal with origin aspects and normal, let's say, customs and transit aspects. If somebody sees another possibility, I'm happy to hear it. And again, to the audience, if you think I missed something out, tell me. This shall be rather discussion here.
It sort of leads on as well, Koja. Ian, one of our committee members, has asked, can RGR be used for EU goods in free circulation in the UK, then returned to the EU island? So that's the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah, a what?
Can RGR be used for EU goods in free circulation in the UK, then returned to the EU island?
What does GR mean here?
RGR, can RGR?
Maybe this should be. I don't get the acronym here. Maybe I'm just.
Returned goods relief.
Okay, yeah. So absolutely. Sorry, I was sometimes bear with me here. I'm not that familiar with the UK terms, but yes, of course, a return goods relief is possible, but then you have to abide by the rules of return goods. So you have to prove the identity of the good. And you have to prove that they have not been manipulated. This, to me, rather applies in cases where you really have a return. You know, you've imported a higher quantity than intended, or you've imported the wrong part or machinery and so on. So there are justified reasons for returns which happen in practice, but then or you just know that the goods may just temporarily be exported, but then of course you also have other options like ATA carnets and so on. But as I said, a returned goods relief is a viable option for returning goods goods imported from mainland EU to Republic of Ireland. This is possible if you comply with the corresponding rules for returned goods, proof of identity, proof of non-manipulation. And this makes it, in my eyes, so difficult that it is not an option for a supply chain design. Whilst I also would and please correct me here, I would be very interested for a feedback on this. Also, the customs warehouse to me is not a real practical supply chain design element, whilst indeed a T2 transit procedure is, and of course a direct shipment to the Republic of Ireland, which from an EU perspective would be just an intra-community transfer and no export of goods.
Thank you, Koja, and thank you to all those members who have suddenly popped up with the acronym Return Goods Relief. So thank you very much. Another question, what is the definition of minimal operations when using non-originating material to produce finished products in the UK? For example, food production such as ready meals or salads made in the UK, but with a significant proportion of EU or rest of the world ingredients?
Yeah, clear. I knew that the question would come, Kevin, and therefore I have prepared this slide. And you won't believe me, I have even the site of the agreement open here, and I switched to it. So insufficient production is a comprehensive listing with 16 items, which again contain alternatives and enumeration. So it is practical dozens of options which are mentioned for an insufficient production. This is, by the way, in other agreements called minimal operation. This is why I use this term similarly or simultaneously. as a basic rule, or in a nutshell, if you consider an operation as simple, it may be insufficient, and you have to check this not to make a wrong assumption on the actual status of the goods. This, by the way, maybe in the EU-UK case very important, for the very reason that we don't have a preference in the Republic of Ireland for EU goods, but only for EU goods. So, sorry, only for UK goods. This means you have to, with EU materials, produce a UK originating good. So have to go beyond minimal operations to claim a preference in the Republic of Ireland for an UK good. The same, however, also applies to all goods being imported from third countries, where you may fulfill the rule of the product specific rules of origin. Let's say you have a value add which is so high that the threshold of 30% third country materials indeed is no problem, but it is still an insufficient operation, then the rule from the product specific list rules does not apply. So it is also important for third country materials. So then there is another rule which shows that simple is not necessarily so simple when you do employ special skills or machines or apparatus or equipment, especially produced or installed. Then, as a classical example, if you grate cheese by hand, it will be a simple operation. If you install machinery for grating the cheese and also chilling it down, that it keeps the temperature, and then in a way weighing it to put it into packages, this is not a simple operation anymore. As another basic rule, especially in food industry, whenever you have, and this is also something which applies in the medical industry, even or in the pharmaceutical industry, even to a high extent, also chemical industries. Whenever you fill a product under specific condition, temperature, pressure, you have an automatic surveillance of the conditions and so on, this is not simple anymore. Whilst one could, from a mere view on what is happening, say, well, they only pack something, but it's a difference whether you pack a pharmaceutical under a certain temperature and with a milligram sensitivity, or, you know, when you just take spices and by hand put them into, I don't know, a little sacks or so on. So I'll just go out here for a second, and as I said, I had prepared the page, which is this one. This is the insufficient production article, and you should indeed, in your example of the ready-made meals, look through the corresponding operations here. So peeling, stoning, shelling of fruits, nuts, and vegetables is a minimal operation. Like I said, the simple grinding, which was my cheese example. So if one, in a way, is so if you are producing highly complex electronic elements, you don't have to look up here. However, if you're producing agricultural products, or you just have, for instance, operations in which from imported parts products are just in a way compiled or so, then you should be aware of those conditions. And not to go through all of them now. This is basically the mentioned enumeration, and this is the paragraph which says that it is not necessarily simple when it needs special skills, machines, apparatus, and so on. And now, Kevin, don't tell me that grating cheese by hand needs special skills. I would deny this. So this is it, and indeed, if you have the ready-made meals, it depends on the actual steps. And there here another important mention. a combination of those steps here still remains a minimal operation. So it wouldn't make sense, but just as a joke, if you would combine all of them, it still would be a minimal operation. However, if you have certain of them which go beyond the criterion of simple, then you can say you've acquired origin. And again, if your products are originating or if you have fulfilled the PSR. So the minimal operations or insufficient production are either the stopper of changing the origin for goods from EU to UK when brought to the Republic of Ireland. This was our first case. And they prohibit you from using the list when you, for instance, import, let's say, parts from China and just put them together, fulfilling a value criterion or even maybe fulfilling a tariff shift criterion, nonetheless still being a minimal operation. For those cases where there are higher risks involved with duties, this is something which should be clarified with customs, because if there is, we'll also have a look into this, if there is a verification of origin later on, EU customs authorities, the German customs authorities, or even the Republic of Ireland customs authorities may ask HMRC, we've obtained statements of origin here and we doubt it, could you please verify it? And HMRC would do a verification. In a critical case, it may be better that this was clarified before, because then HMRC also will have in its records that they have clarified this with you, that it's going beyond a simple operation. I suppose this answered the questions, otherwise Kevin will insist.
Yes, thank you. It's very comprehensive. Thank you very much. I have another question from Lauren. After the import customs clearance, must we send the client a PDF or XML file that they must conserve, like we currently do in Switzerland, or like Switzerland users have to do? After the import customs clearance, must we send the client a PDF or XML file that they must conserve, like Switzerland users currently do?
So if this is a question where I have to guess, what is it about? Is it about the proof of preferential origin, which in this case is the statement of origin? It has to be obtained by the importer, and the importer has to. We'll have it on a further slide. The importer has to keep it for years. It may be kept electronically. It does have to contain the corresponding text of the statement of origin, and also must be stored in a way that it's a document, that it contains a place and date and a signature, so that in a way the identity can be proven.
Yeah, that's great.
So I honestly, I doubt that an XML file would be sufficient here. So if of course in the XML everything was embedded, so the format is, I would say, not the most important. The question, it is allowed explicitly by the agreement that things that proof of origin, which are the statements of origin, are stored electronically. However, it must be done in a way that they do contain all the relevant information, and that they can be proven to be an unaltered proof of the document received. So it must have the characteristics of the document, which must be reproducible from the technical way of storing it. So this is my immediate answer here.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
We do have. By the way, just here as a, but we'll look into this later. Usually, the proof of origin, which is the statement of origin, should be available at importation, but the agreement also foresees that it can be claimed later. So this is nothing which has to happen at the time of importation, whilst from a procedural standpoint, it may be smarter to already have it there and claim it directly. And if you claim it, you of course need evidence. However, we do have a waiver that in the first year you don't necessarily have to have suppliers declarations, but you need a statement of origin from your exporter when you want to claim the preference. So when dealing with PSRO, we also know that there are tolerances. I mentioned them here because there are certain deviations or particularities of the EU-UK one, which do introduce rules which will come with the reform of the Pan-Euro Meat Regional Convention next year in the EU's agreements. The classical 10% value tolerance is complemented by a weight tolerance of 15% for Chapter 2 and 4 to 24, with the exception of produced fish products of Chapter 16. The idea here is that weight is more stable than prices of agricultural materials, which can be varied to a greater extent. And just to bear in mind that textiles do have their own tolerance rules also as in other agreements. It is also noteworthy that tolerances do not extend value or weight thresholds, so you may not use it on top. It is rather when you, for instance, have a tariff shift as a requirement, you may use 10%, for instance, of value or 50% of weight of products which are not shifting then. For wholly obtained products, when they are wholly obtained by the general rule of Article 3, they don't, or they must not be subject to tolerances. When there is, or when there are materials for which the list of the product-specific rules requires wholly obtained as a feature of the list rules, then this may be subject to a tolerance. So this means that then 10% of value or 10%, sorry, of 15% of weight may not be wholly obtained. And also this is in a different article. We do have a known specific tolerance for sets, which is like the other known agreements of the EU and now the UK at 15%. This means in a set, 15% of the value of the set may be non-originating, still making the set an originating product of either the EU or the UK.
Thank you. Thank you. And another one here. Why is it difficult to use a customs warehouse for goods imported from Portugal into the UK and then shipped back to an EU country? You are not allowed to do any processing in a customs warehouse. Surely this should be enough evidence that the goods have not been manipulated. I think you did touch on this earlier, but I think they're looking for clarity there.
No, this is I think somebody asked and said I must not interrupt a transit procedure with warehousing. So yes, a warehousing procedure is something different here, and the questioner here is absolutely right. You may bring goods from Portugal to a customs warehouse in the UK, and then do bring them into the Republic of Ireland, but then technically they are returned goods. Because you can't import them as EU goods because there is no preference for EU goods in the Republic of Ireland. So you have to prove that these are the identical goods which have been exported from Portugal, which are now imported to Ireland. And this means that you have to connect the export declaration from Portugal, at least from the information given there, with the import in the Republic of Ireland. If the party is the same, there may be no, or the parties are related, there may be no issue in sharing this information. If the parties are not related, the export party may not want to share the information that this can be invoices and so on that has been used for export with the importing party. But again, technically it is possible as long as you are able to prove the union status of the goods at re-import into Ireland, because this is basically a re-entering of goods. So I just doubt, but maybe here in the audience we have people who can judge this better. I just doubt that this is a viable option for supply chain design.
Yeah. sort of leads on to this as well, I think as well. If we have our own customs warehouse and we import finished goods from Italy to the UK and place them under bond in our warehouse, can we then send some of these products to the ROI, rest of Republic of Ireland, and not pay duty on the import to the Republic of Ireland? How would the import declarations into the Republic of Ireland be processed as receiving an EU product and duty not being applicable?
Same answer.
Yep.
So when you and even maybe I can do it like this. The customs warehouse is not even necessary when you can prove the status of returned goods here. You see what I mean? The customs warehouse is just an easier option to do so, because then you can basically see, say the goods have not even entered free circulation. The point again is when you declare the goods in Ireland, they have not been shipped in a transit procedure. They have been brought to the UK and well, either brought in free circulation or gone into a customs warehouse, which makes things easier. But nonetheless, in the end, you have to prove to Irish customs or Republic of Ireland customs that the goods are returned union goods. You have no option to declare them as EU originating, because then you pay the duty, because there is no relief for duties on EU goods in the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah.
So therefore you may not you may not even need the warehouse when you can prove to customs of the Republic of Ireland that you have returned goods. I just had the idea, if you just put it in a warehouse and split it up there, you can more easily prove the status, because with returned goods you usually have to prove two things: the goods are identical and they have not been manipulated. But both is necessary. And again, if this is a very interesting point, and I know the utmost practical importance of it. I would be glad if the audience so feel free not only to ask questions. If you think I am wrong in what I'm saying, please tell me. And especially if you think there are viable options in these examples, kindly share them with the audience. Yeah. But the problem in the context, this is why I said in the beginning, these examples where you indeed import goods into the UK and don't process them further there to produce a UK good. Again, a UK good can re-enter, so it doesn't re-enter, UK good can enter the EU, Republic of Ireland, or any other country free of duties. If you achieve UK originating status, you have a proof everything's fine. The problem is you do import something from the EU that you don't process in the UK, maybe not at all, or not enough, so that it doesn't go beyond the minimal operation, then you won't change its origin under the agreement. It is still EU good, and there is no preference in the Republic of Ireland or any other EU country for EU good. So then it is basically a returned good. And the concept of returned goods is different. The concept of returned goods is rather that you have a reason for return. The concept of returned goods usually is not importing goods over from Portugal over the UK to Ireland. So we are just using this concept in a way to find one potential solution. And everything we discuss now, if you want to, so what the whole and by the way, check the duties first. if the goods are duty-free from the MFN tariff, we don't have to discuss it for those goods. I know that especially in the agricultural sector, we still have high duties, so it might be a very or even more important question here. But if we have goods which are subject to zero duty in the UK and zero duty in Ireland, we can forget about this. We still have 2 times customs clearance, and maybe then just from a customs clearance perspective, it is easier to ship them directly to the Republic of Ireland. But this, of course, depends on the actual size of the market and the amount of goods, whether they qualify for separate treatment.
Koja, another question's come in, and this sort of goes back to the Percy Pigs operation where you were saying about grated cheese, etc. And the question that's come from Celine, thank you. What if the operation changes the classification of the products and makes it into something else? Will it still be considered a simple operation?
Yeah. If it is a simple, so you may use an EU good in the UK as if it was a UK originating good. So you may use EU cheese, let's say Parmesan, in the UK as if it was an EU originating good if you do an overall operation in the UK which goes beyond a minimal operation. A change of tariff shift is not important. A change of tariff heading is not important for a minimal operation. It's the same logic as with third country materials. You may fulfill the product-specific rules of origin, but you may still not reach originating status because you have not done more than a minimal operation. I can say it in this: the minimal operation is a blocker for acquiring origin. Or let's say going beyond minimal operations is the condition for acquiring origin. And this is actually the problem, and this is important here. The origin has to change in the 2 examples from EU to UK, or from a non-originating material to an originating product by fulfilling the product-specific rules of origin by at the same time having done more than a minimal operation.
Yep. I've got loads of questions coming through.
One proposal. Then let's do it like this. I expected this, and I've been reacting very flexible. Let me just go through the presentation. It's not many slides, and then I've got some opened pages here. I just wanted to show you for more information. I can then include the links into the presentation, send it over to you, Kevin, for distribution. Yeah, right. And then we of course may discuss further examples, or let's say if these are the most imminent questions which I already expected from those you've sent before, then we may of course today lay a focus on those and discuss other aspects later. But it's really, I can only emphasize this again. Seeing Kevin's questions on which were basically your questions on, I think, Monday evening. I set up a call with an origin expert in Germany. And discussed in the German night those questions just to see whether my assumptions were right. We did not find other options than those I've just told you. So, and we do have a certain expertise in the field. Nonetheless, this is a very specific situation. I would really like audience to actively state if they would disagree to our findings here, and if they say if they were of the opinion we would overlook something if there are viable options. And again, but then bear in mind it must be technically possible. Just doing a returned goods exercise may not be a clever supply chain design, as I said before. Okay, I'll rush through the remaining slides, Kevin, if you allow. Okay.
Thank you, and I'll get back to the questions when we go to the Q&A section.
Okay. General rules of origin always have a product view. This means every product is addressed individually. with your ready-made meals. You may have one ready-made meal then which is originating, and you may have another ready-made meal which is not originating because you did not produce it from EU materials, but materials imported from a third country. Generally, packing materials and containers for shipment are not counted for origin purposes. For shipment, I said. For retail sale, they only count against a value threshold. They don't count as regards production processes or tariff shifts. This technically also applies to accessories, spare parts, and tools in sensible quantities, not invoiced separately, and again, not relevant for rules other than value rules where they have to be calculated. As a general rule, materials not incorporated in the product but used or consumed in production are considered as neutral. So they don't play any role here if they are not incorporated in the product. From a economic perspective, you may, when calculated the ex-works price, of course, have a reasonable calculation of cost and also margin here. So in a way, they will count from a general perspective, but from an origin perspective, you don't make them part of the actual origin calculation. We do have a relaxed accounting segregation in the TCA. There's a general rule that originating and non-originating materials and products, materials and products, I have to pronounce better, being fungible, so not distinguishable, shall be stored separately. If the products are clearly distinguishable, they of course don't have to be stored separately, but if they are fungible, materials and products need to be stored separately for origin purposes. However, if an operator uses a generally accepted, not an individually invented one, accounting segregation method, the materials may be stored together. Careful, this as a general rule only relates to materials. It is already an achievement of TCA here that for product, it is also possible for certain products, like we see here, grain of chapter 10, oils of chapter 15, chemical products of 2789, 29. I think these are paints here in 32 and plastic basic materials in 39. So for those products, you may also store originating and non-originating materials together, for instance, in a silo or in a tank or so. Unlike other agreements of the EU and the UK, because it has replicated the EU agreements, accounting segregation is not subject to conditions. Older agreements make the condition that the separate storage is cumbersome and expensive, and only then you may apply for accounting segregation. Here, accounting segregation simply is possible with the limitations given above, but it may require an authorization. And I don't know how this will be handled in the UK. When I do read in the EU, it may require an authorization. It will require an authorization. So to finalize on the general rules, the remaining material rules, then we come to the formal ones. We don't have a classical direct transport rule anymore, but just a non-alteration rule. This means products, but this is for transport to through third countries, and also the splitting of consignment I mentioned here is in third countries. The storage and exhibition and so on. These are all regulations which apply to third countries. And even products returned from a third country only retain their origin if their identity and non-manipulation is proven. This is the same what we said for EU goods going to the UK and then to the Republic of Ireland. Nonetheless, these rules do apply for products leaving the territory of the, let's say, the preferential territory of the UK and the 27 member states. So it doesn't apply to the cases we have discussed. There is no drawback rule, which means there's no prohibition of duty drawback. So you may claim back duties for materials used in production, notwithstanding the use of a preference later, or the claim of a preference by using a statement on origin. This rule is subject to review after 2 years at the earliest. We have those review rules, for instance, also in the South Korea agreement with the EU. However, it has not been made use of. I don't show it in large. I can go back to that. Now we are at the formal requirements. I'll look at the time. So preferential treatment needs to be claimed, usually with a customs import declaration, and the grant of preferential treatment or remission of duties in those cases where it is claimed later, if the claim is made within 3 years after importation. The claim has to be based on either a statement on origin and importer's knowledge. I also learned that there are some misconceptions about importer's knowledge. We will mainly speak about the statement of origin here, and I will tell you why importer's knowledge is rather a very specific solution for specific situations. So the normal proof of origin is a statement on origin, which again means here, as it is based either on a statement on origin or importer's knowledge, we don't have a formal proof of origin here. So there is no EUA1 or a corresponding official certificate. We can also say this agreement, the TCA, applies full self-certification. Statements on origin may be made out for single shipments, and they may be made out for multiple shipments of identical products to be imported within 12 months. Then a certain period, then the period has to be given on the document, which looks like this. Annex ORIC 4 does contain the text of the agreement, is the following here. And again, just for avoidance of doubt, the supplier's declaration in the TCA is the cross-border supplier's declaration for full cumulation, only in case goods are shipped between UK and EU and vice versa, which have not yet acquired originating status, but you may nonetheless like to communicate which production already has been carried out in one party to complete it in the other party. This is the supplier's declaration or the cross-border supplier's declaration. The regular proof for goods which already have acquired origin is the statement on origin. It is simple. It only contains a period when it is made out for multiple shipments for a maximum time frame of 12 months. The text is not that complicated to read. It requires an exporter reference number to be indicated. In the UK, for any value, it is the UK EORI number. In the EU, we use the REX number, but the REX number only needs to be indicated when there is a shipment above 6,000 euros. So if you are a REX in the EU, you may indicate your number regardless of the value. If the value of the shipment is more than 6,000 euro, you have to be a REX, otherwise the proof is not valid. This is something you should look on the import side and secure you obtain a valid statement of origins containing a REX number when the value is higher than 6,000 euro, and you then also in the REX database can check whether the party is really registered there. If you don't find it there, you may have a problem with this proof of origin and should go after. A statement on origin can be made out. So they are called invoice or they have been called invoice declarations in the past because they are often made on invoices. However, even an invoice declaration, if it is named so in older agreements, can be made on any commercial document which is describing the product sufficiently. It can also be a pro forma invoice. It can be a freight document. It can be a packing list, as long as the identity of the goods can be proven. This is important for those cases where you have a third-party invoicing. Then the statement shall be made by the party who actually has produced the goods, and this then can be made, for instance, on a delivery notice. So Yeah, the validity is 12 months in the EU. So when we receive statements of origins from the UK, they are valid for 12 months in the EU. The UK has extended this period to 24 months. So an EU statement of origin is valid 24 months in the UK. The statements must be kept. So the agreement says 3 years. I read in the HMRC guidance, they say 4 years. So I wrote 4 years here. Because of course the authorities of the parties may go beyond what the agreement says here. The agreement says at least 3 years. HMRC says the statements must be kept by the importer for 4 years, and the exporter must retain a copy and the underlying documentation. This is the actual documentation how he has achieved origin. So what I call the origin calculation must also be kept for 4 years to give evidence on which actual criteria the statement of origin was made out. And so when you make out a statement of origin, you need evidence that the product is indeed originating, and you usually need to have the evidence when you make out the statement. We do have this transitional rule that in the first year, so until the end of 21, in the UK and in the EU, you may issue a statement of origin although you may not already have obtained a supplier's declaration. And again, here, the domestic suppliers declarations are meant, not the cross-border ones of this agreement. So if you have not obtained suppliers declarations yet, you may chase your suppliers throughout the year and obtain them. And you should, however, or your supplier should communicate to you in the case that he can't give you such declaration, and you then also have to communicate this to customs if you have claimed origin before, because then the duties in fact have to be paid later. So we in a way here have, this is the last point on the page, we do have a waiver of the requirement of domestic suppliers declarations for those cases where the operator, however, is confident that he will acquire origin and just or will have acquired origin and just does not have yet obtained the corresponding declaration. Another warning here, there is no obligation to issue supplier's declaration. If a supplier doesn't want to issue supplier's declaration, you have no entitlement to get it from him unless you have put this down in a contractual clause. Usually suppliers will be cooperative, but it's important to know that there is no customs regulation that you may force them to do so. It is also so that some suppliers by this control the actual markets where the goods go to, in which refraining from giving certain declarations on certain origins for certain destinations to their further distributors. So at least important to know. You don't need a supplier's declaration when you have evidence that the level of your own production fulfills the PSRO. Then then you don't have to collect supplier's declaration at all. Otherwise, when your own production does not already fulfill the PSRO and you have materials you need to prove the origin status of, then you need domestic suppliers declarations. And you may of course use these famous cross-border suppliers declarations under the TCA, but these are for non-preferential origin. Suppliers declarations domestically also may be for preferential origin, usual case, not so usual non-preferential origin, and the cross-border ones are simply for non-preferential origin. And you may, of course, also use statements of origin from the other party. So if you have, if you produce a good in the UK from an EU material, you have a statement of origin from materials you source in the UK with domestic suppliers declarations. Then in the end, you will have a set of statements of origin from the EU and domestic suppliers declarations to prove that these materials have been originating to fulfill the rule, provided, again, you don't already fulfill it with your own level of production. And not to forget this, always bear in mind which are the actual customs duties to be paid in the end. This was my initial statement. Of course, when the goods are duty free, you may not need to do all of these exercise unless your importer requires from you contractually or not to have a statement because he may then like to use the goods in a further accumulation. So origin shall be stated correctly and it can be verified. If you will then, and in self-certification, the issue is you cannot just say, I have an EU01 issued by customs, I do have a Form A issued by customs. Here, it is just between the parties. You have to be sure that your exporter furnishes you with a correct declaration, because otherwise, when it comes to verification and it's found out that the statement from the exporter was not correct, you have to repay the duties. And if fraud is involved and intention, then this may also be further prosecuted. So you have nothing more from your exporter than the statement of origin. He doesn't have to give you more, but you can of course speak to him and to see whether he knows what he does. When customs on the importing side, let's say the customs authorities of the Republic of Ireland have a doubt, they will ask the importer for the statement of origin and the following criteria, and they must not ask anything more, but they will ask for the statement and information on the category in case of wholly obtained products, the classifications in case of a tariff shift, values or weights in case of corresponding thresholds, or the description of the process when required to the PSRO, by the PSRO. This means customs in the Republic of Ireland or customs in Germany will ask the German importer to change the country for the statement of origin obtained from the UK plus information on the origin criteria. And now it may be that the German importer does not know what the criterion is because the UK exporter is not obliged to tell him. Then the authorities in Germany may get back to HMSC and ask HMSC, and HMSC will then ask the UK exporter. So the UK exporter who has made out the statement of origin is obliged to prove it, but he's not obliged to prove it towards his German importer, and he's not obliged to prove it towards German customs. German customs must not even contact the EU exporter. German customs will contact HMSC. HMSC will contact the exporter. Just as a general point here, it may be worthwhile to, however, if it is possible within the boundaries of business secrets, it may be worthwhile to clarify this between the parties not involving customs and mutual collaboration of customs here, because if customs then comes across, looks into the statements of origin and the processes, this theoretically may also trigger an audit. There are cases you can't avoid it because they also do it in a randomized way, but in most cases, it is indeed because there is a doubt arising in the country of import. The importer is asked when the importer can actually get rid of the doubts, then everything is fine. If he can't, then the mutual collaboration comes in, or mutual cooperation it's called, comes in, and this may mean that HMSC is finally addressing you as the UK exporter, or as German customs is addressing the German exporter, just to know what was the background of the statement of origin being given, and if this was justified. Importers have a 3-month period to answer for the first request, another 3 months for a second request, and the authorities have up to 10 months. If there are doubts, the shipment must be cleared, but customs may, however, ask for a guarantee for the duties. Now to very briefly speak about importer's knowledge. Here I wrote and. So in the case of, I must not click. So for the case of statements of origin, you need the statement. The importer needs to present the statement and information on the criteria. In the case of importer's knowledge, you don't have no statement at all. You just have the criteria. So customs will ask you for those criteria. Those criteria will only be known at the importer side if the exporter has fully shared them with the importer here. And you don't have any statement, any evidence apart from information from the exporter. And this practically mainly works between related parties, and particularly when you do have an affiliate. Just say a UK company has a production plant in Germany and with the ERP system has direct access to the origin calculation of the German affiliate. They may just present to HMSC, look, this is our plant, this is our production, and this is how we do produce the goods in Germany. Then the importer technically also at the exporter. And in these cases, it may make sense to not employ statements of origin, but with unrelated parties, this is rather the rare exception than the rule. We have this for Japan, where it was in the EU-Japan one, it was introduced the first time, and we see it rarely used in practice, and especially in those cases where you have multinational companies which are actually present on both sides of the border and run processes which are actually border crossing, and they can prove all aspects of the process in either country. So importer's knowledge does not mean that the importer knows something, but importer's knowledge means the importer can completely verify with customs that the goods have acquired origin in the exporting country. And this is a very important point here. If importer's knowledge is chosen as a proof of origin, then there is no chance and no possibility of administrative collaboration. This means in the case of importer's knowledge, HMSC must not ask German customs for assistance. This means it's a clarification only between HMSC and the importer without involving German or another member state's customs. This means if the importer then cannot prove its knowledge sufficiently, there will be no preference at all. Very briefly touching upon the product-specific rules. Most important finding, PSR product-specific rules are only need to be considered if origin is not conferred by the general rules. If my products are if my goods are wholly obtained or only produced from originating materials, I don't look into the list. I only look into the list when I do have non-originating materials. And here I have to look into the list because the rule can be a tariff shift, then the value may be low, but the material hasn't shifted. Or it may be a value rule, then I have to calculate that I fulfill the value threshold or the weight threshold. So general rule, if I need, so if I employ or apply non-originating materials, I have to look into the list. If these are few materials of a low value, then maybe my calculation is very simple, but I have to look into the list. But the criteria of the product-specific rules only apply to non-originating materials. I don't have to calculate with originating materials. I don't have to calculate with all of my materials. So if I only use 20% non-originating materials, the 80% of my originating materials do not count at all. Only for those rules where there is a relation, but these are very there are very few in the agreements usually. So this means I only look in the list, provided that I use non-originating materials. But if I use non-originating materials, I have to look into the list, but I only look on them and not on all materials. This simplifies to a large extent. This is sometimes just overlooked. I also read in some instructions that you should look into the PSR whether your product is covered. This is complete nonsense. From the fact that all products are duty-free, quota-free, all products also must be covered by the PSR. You don't have to look up whether your products are there. You just have to see by which PSR your product is covered. And this may be often and is often on a higher level. This means your product, which qualifies with a 10-digit import number, however, is already covered on the 2-digit chapter level or the 4-digit heading level, or in certain cases, the 6-digit subheading level. The PSR follow the structure of the harmonized system. So indeed, you come from your customs classification to the actual identification of the rule. And especially with, this was on the last slide, with tariff shift rules, you not only have to know the tariff item or the HS code of the product, but also of the material. So when you have a tariff shift rules, you have to clarify that the materials actually change their chapter, heading or subheading. The origin criteria we saw already with regard to the statement of origin are the threshold of the value of non-originating materials in relation to the ex-works price, which is called max nom, which is the Japanese style. The rules are written in the Japanese style. The rules, however, are more similar to the new pan-Euro meat rules, which you already use in the UK for the Turkey agreement. So it's the Japanese style, but the new pan-Euro meat rule well set, I would say. Yeah? This is new in this agreement, also noteworthy. You may calculate the value of the non-originating materials on the basis of a weighted average. Unfortunately, this is only possible for non-originating materials. It is not possible for originating materials, and it is not possible for products. So the ex-works you may not still calculate on a weighted average. This only applies to non-originating materials. Weight criteria you do have on a threshold of non-originating materials. So you have value and weight criteria. Weight criteria do come in to a great extent in the new agreements. You find more weight criteria in the new rules than in older rules. Which is because they are considered more stable than a value in the agricultural sector. You've got tariff shift criteria, as I said, with chapter change of tariff heading, and change of tariff subheading. You may, for instance, in the chemical industries, have the requirement of specific production processes to be fulfilled. The most prominent example of this is textiles. You may also have certain materials that are explicitly included, so you have to use them, or they are excluded from a PSR. Other materials which are not explicitly mentioned, you may always use. And again, we had this before, don't forget about tolerance rules when applying PSR. However, don't use them with value or weight. The T is missing, threshold rules. I think this is the last one. Yeah, last slide. So some very few particularities. We don't have tariff quotas, but we have origin quotas. Origin quotas are relaxed product-specific rules within an annual quota. This applies for canned tuna and aluminium products. These are not tariff rate quotas. So the mention there are no quotas means there are no tariff rate quotas. For the aluminium product, the quota amounts will decrease over time. We do have in another specific annex, only interesting for those who deal with accumulators and electronic vehicles. These are subject to transitionally relaxed rules over the periods, over two-year periods, and then from 27 onwards. This is to support the electronic vehicles and accumulators industry on both sides of the channel. And just as one very important remark, this is not a PSR, so it is not in the origin part, it's in the goods part, it's Article Goods 8. As we spoke about returned goods, if you have products which are sent to the other side of the channel for a repair, both the goods sent for repair and the goods being repaired are duty-free regardless from the origin. So ever when you have a repair operation which does not modify the goods by increasing their features, so it's just a repair, it's clearly defined in the agreement, then you don't have to care for origin, it is duty-free. So here we are. So 4 minutes left, Kevin, right? But I'll stay a little longer anyway. I can give me 2 minutes, Kevin, and then we do the question. I just had prepared some things. I won't even elaborate on. I just tell you that they're existent and I include the links. It may be worthwhile. So, of course, and you will have read what was published on the UK side. The EU side also has published comprehensive information. I will include some links. So this is the question and answers. Sorry, it's here from the UK government. The summary you may know, but like the UK government, this is nice because it really goes along the agreement, covering every title, every chapter, and so on. So this is where we talked about. There is a similar thing from the EU, which sets a different tone, which here is in HTML, but also is in PDF. It also goes through the agreement with questions and answers. I'll include the links for you. The EU also has a nice summary as a 6-pager, which just says what has changed. This is also, well, quite comprehensive if you would like to see what is the EU perspective. And we have this, which was quite popular also on LinkedIn. This is actual comparison of the member state and the current status under the agreement, and you see the differences. So again, I suppose you will more be looking into the UK publications. I'll just give you the links to the EU publications, which are linked from here. There's a site with the EU publication of the agreement and all of these additional materials. Well, I wanted originally to go through some examples with you using the new check tool of the IT, but given time, we may do this, or if you have a concrete example, we can look into it, but given time, we shall supposedly speak about questions first, right? Kevin.
Koja, thank you very, very much. It's certainly created a lot of interest. I mean, it's a hot topic. The questions have been flooding in via email, via text, via the chat, via the message box. I don't think we're going to get through all the questions today. I think I've probably got around about 26 questions. So if we can sort of, we are coming to an end, so I know that people will have to drop off. But how much time can you give us, Koja?
I would even have I would even have half an hour. So let's just see, Kevin, that we start discussing. You will see how many people will drop off, and let's just discuss a little. And if we see there are too many questions, we may also have a follow-up session in the next weeks. Huh? So nothing
Perfect.
prevents us from doing so.
Perfect. Okay, so from Yomal, we have a customer bringing paper into the UK via import, which are union goods and exported to Republic of Ireland. Exported and imported into the Republic of Ireland. So customers importing into the Republic of Ireland would need to state goods had EU origin on declaration, but importing from the UK and using an HC code, this would give correct tariff based on EU tariff?
Yep.
Am I correct to assume that?
Yeah, so you pay tariffs then, absolutely. So this is what we want to avoid. Yeah.
Perfect. Question from Dinesh. Thanks, Dinesh. I'm glad we're going to get to this. What about wholly produced goods in Turkey? I'm not quite sure.
No, Dinesh, no cumulation with Turkey. We have in the UK EU TCA. No cumulation with any third-party goods. This was a proposal of the UK. You don't have it here. You may only use goods from EU and UK for cumulation. You may, of course, use, Dinesh, third-party goods, but then they have to fulfill the criterion of the product-specific rules. And if the product-specific rules requires wholly obtained, then you may still use the tolerance rule of 10% value or 15% weight. But if you have tomatoes from Turkey, you'll import them so there is an agreement with Turkey too, of course. But the customs union between EU and Turkey plays no role here.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a view from Gavin. Just my view. Problem with T2 is it disallows storing goods, only cross-docking perhaps. So ruins any distribution operation in the UK. The problem with the customs warehouse is it splits the transit, so could not be used. For instance, if we export goods to the USA and the USA happens to use the USA customs warehouse and the goods return 2 months later to the EU, how can the EU know, or do they care, that the goods were in the customs warehouse in the USA and then it would come back as a non-manipulated, I assume the same logic for the UK customs warehouse?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Maybe we should even forget about the customs warehousing there. So yeah, I have no immediate solution for the case where you really would like to do actual supply chain splitting operations in the UK with EU goods. So indeed, you may not use then a T2, which is, by the way, the common transit procedure. So you can go to the customs warehouse with a UK transit procedure, go into the warehouse, and with a transit procedure go out if you would like to. I think this is quite cumbersome. And all for the sake that in the end you have a better proof to Republic of Ireland customs that you have basically goods which are returned to the EU. You can have this proof of returned goods also without customs warehousing at all. Again, you just have to prove identity and non-manipulation.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but this, if somebody, so if this is a crucial question. If somebody has the solution for the Percy Picks example, please tell us. I say there is none.
Brilliant. Question from Manpret. I have a question around GSP, which both the UK and the EU have signed up to. If goods that qualify for GSP are shipped to the UK, e.g. 100 units, and held in a customs warehouse, when we then export to an EU country, e.g. 50 units, how can we ensure that our customers in the EU can import based on GSP? I've heard the certificate of non-manipulation can be issued. If this is correct, how do we do this?
So we had this question before because under GSP we have a splitting of consignments. That's actually the question, and it have been asked how this is for those countries where we had the rules before. With this was Switzerland, Norway. And I think for Turkey, it has not been applied yet. So with the Swiss agreement, the Swiss authorities have published in a circular that with or in the context of the continuation agreement with the UK, they have also agreed on splitting consignments and issuing back-to-back Form A's or back-to-back declarations on origin. So for Switzerland, this is regulated. I then, because of your questions, I tried to find this out in the UK and on the EU side. I must tell you, I wasn't successful here yet. So it has to be published and notified. So splitting of consignments under GSP means that there is a regulation like there is now between UK and Switzerland. I have not seen it yet between the UK and the EU. And if you want to fully reinstate the previous situation, then there are also a corresponding agreement between UK and Norway is needed. It is possible that this is in the Norway-Iceland agreement, which has been concluded recently, the new one. If somebody knows, please tell us. But again, these are agreements by exchange of letters, and this has to be done and it has to be notified. You cannot just do it without a legal basis for this. And frankly, I've seen a lot of comments from the EU side. I have not read something on GSP product treatment between UK and EU. I'm sure that this will be available, but again, this needs a basis, and then you must be aware of the basis. And frankly, I am not.
Thank you. We've still got a lot of people remaining on, which I'd like to thank you also. We'll keep going through. Is the UK origin considered as an originating within the EU FTAs? So,
No.
for example, can the EU company still use a UK origin as originating when calculating preference for goods made in the EU for export to South Korea, for instance?
No.
No.
No, non-originating goods. And here comes, so this agreement, the TCA, again, I think here the EU was quite hard because in comparison to other agreements, this is a very strict cumulation rule in the TCA, with the only exemption that we really have full cumulation here, which we will, however, have as a standard rule with the reformed regional convention from next year on. So the UK proposal was very flexible here. The UK proposal would have indeed have meant that when both parties, EU and UK, do have agreements with third countries, that then a corresponding cumulation is possible. This was one of the ideas of the UK in the continuation approach of the agreements. So even with Switzerland, now the Swiss authorities have, you know that we discussed the question, will cumulation with EU goods be possible in the agreement of the UK with Switzerland? The UK-Switzerland agreement allows for cumulation. The EU of EU goods. The EU UK TCA does not allow for any diagonal cumulation. It is not possible for the TCA. It is theoretically possible for the UK-Switzerland agreement to still cumulate with EU goods in either the UK or Switzerland. The Swiss authorities have issued a circular saying, okay, now there is an agreement between the UK and the EU, and there is mutual assistance or mutual collaboration between customs authorities. However, you may still not cumulate because the rules of origin are not identical between the EU-UK between the EU-UK agreement and the UK-Switzerland agreement. The Swiss authorities also have communicated, not officially, but one has heard this, a potential solution to operators, and the potential solution is that these rules are renegotiated. Switzerland is open to renegotiate the rules so that the rules become identical with those of the TCA, but this of course will take some time. So Switzerland does not say they don't want to accumulate, they just say they take the precondition serious that the rules have to be identical, or there must be an agreement that accumulation also is possible with the rules when they are not identical.
Thank you. Another question from Yomal, thank you. If you use, I think we may have touched on this actually, if you use the customs warehouse route from the EU to the UK and transit move goods from the EU to the Republic of Ireland as an import declaration, is an import declaration still required in the Republic of Ireland to move goods, assuming need export entry from customs warehouse?
Yeah, of course it is. It has left the EU territory. The only case when you don't need a declaration is when you really have a direct shipping line between two EU harbors. So I don't see it here. Actually, you need a customs declaration and you will pay duty. So it is only if you can prove the goods have not lost their union status. And as we discussed before, this hampers the T2 procedure. However, it was just the idea of a logistic procedure of splitting goods in the UK with an easier proof towards the Republic of Ireland authorities that the goods have not lost their, again, EU union status, because with their EU originating status, they won't qualify.
Thank you. Thank you. A question here from Gavin. Anyone have a different view on this, or but this is my view, is the UK customs warehouse is simply a local facilitation to save local money, not something recognized automatically by a third world country, EU. Would the USA company with a local custom warehouse equivalent be able to ship, well, I think you've answered that question actually, be able to ship EU goods back to the EU many months later?
Yeah, so there is a difference in the UK. So if you use a customs warehouse, you don't customs clear the goods in the UK for free circulation. Yeah. You see what I mean? So this may just even think you have them labeled for you have parts of the consignment labeled differently for Ireland or so. So there may be reasons why you don't want to bring them into free circulation in the UK. However, as said before, the customs warehouse is not the solution for the proof of the EU status. It may just facilitate this proof. The proof must be the regular proof for returned goods. And again, I don't think this is a viable strategy.
Yeah, yeah. Another question from Nicola, who's one of the ACITA committees. Thank you, Nicola. When goods leave the territory of the EU, they automatically lose their union status. Act of 154 or registration 952/2013. So on re-entry to the EU, they are treated exactly the same as goods of any other origin and without use of RGR, which is...
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So unless you have the very specific case of return goods, where you then can say these are the exact goods which have the exact goods which have been imported have been, so if they leave the territory, they lose their originating status unless you can prove that they have been under the corresponding agreements directly transported, not manipulated, and so on. And you also lose the EU union status unless you can prove that these are returned goods. But then if you do this, you usually, before shipping them, already secure that you can bring them back as returned goods. So in normal operations, it doesn't work, no.
Yeah, thank you. A question, another one from Sandra. Thank you, Sandra. What CPC/regime would apply if goods went back after non-manipulation? Example, company imports cheese from their own Irish farm. They cut the cheese into supermarket packages and label as Irish cheddar. They return the packages to the Irish farm company for distribution in IE and in the EU. Good question.
Again, so the cheese has, if it is from the Republic of Ireland, the cheese has EU origin. It is brought into the UK. It is sliced and put into packages. If this is a minimal operation, it is not conferring UK origin, then you bring them back and have to pay actually duties in Ireland. So you have to go beyond a minimal operation. Otherwise, it is not good to do this operation in the UK anymore. It's like this.
Thank you. Thank you. There's another one here. Koja, please could you clarify? Returned goods returning to the EU can be goods that A, were not cleared to free circulation in the UK, or B, were cleared to free circulation in the UK. The customs clearance in the UK is irrelevant.
It is absolutely. So return goods do not mean that. So I think in the beginning we had this twist where we brought the warehouse in, which made it a little problematic. Maybe I should have been clearer before. So for the return goods, it plays no rule whether the goods have been in circulation in the UK or not. For return goods, the only question is, are they identical or are they not manipulated? It does play no rule whether they are in free circulation. However, you don't want to put them in free circulation if you don't want to customs clear them in the UK and pay duties here. Well, provided they are originating, you can say they are duty free, but maybe you don't want to put them in free circulation. Then a customs warehouse may be the smarter part. And if they are in a customs warehouse, maybe then it is easier to prove, because they have been in a customs supervision, that they are indeed identical and unaltered. But this then is just a, let's say, a facilitating factor. If you just import them, let's say they are duty free under the agreement, in EU good is imported into the UK, duty free under the agreement. It is not it is the identical good, not further manipulated in the UK and re-exported in the corresponding time frame. And you can then prove that it is indeed a returned EU good, then it is duty free, but this means a proof of identity of the goods. And consider this with Perthy Pigs, the proof of identity. So this is rather something you do with a machine, with something really tangible. So not with mass production or mass operations in supply chains. So yes, the customs warehouse is no condition for returning goods. It was just the idea to, in a way, doing a splitting operation without bringing the goods into free circulation of the UK. And consider free circulation may also mean that you have to abide by certain other rules. Of course, when going to free circulation, goods may need to meet rules they don't have to meet when they are in a customs warehouse. But again, the customs warehouse is no precondition for returned goods. But again, returned goods in my eyes are not the solution. If at all, they may be just an intermediate operation. So until better solutions are in place.
Product-specific rules of origin question. In, say, chapter 39, how do we read the rules of origin? For example, do you have to meet both the CTSH rule and the chemical reaction rule, or are they two separate rules? I.e., does the semicolon mean and, or, and, or?
I understand it. I just, what was the product? 39 what?
Chapter 39, CTSH rule and the chemical reaction rule.
I would need a clearer number, I suppose. So I don't know where this. Let's just look here, whether we have it here. So yeah, here it is. Yes, of course. Yeah, very good. So this is, by the way, the nice point about check. So the service of the ACITA, which you just find when you enter check duties. It's the first entry in Google. You see the tariff preference for the UK is 0%. The most favored nation duty in the EU is 6%. And careful, we also have an autonomous tariff suspension here. This means, but this is here the view of export in the EU, of course, United Kingdom to France. But here you can use the tariff suspension without fulfilling the rules. Which means you don't have to fulfill them here, which is good. But if you have to fulfill them, then it is a very good question. You have to distinguish. There are rules which say you have to, in a cumulative way, fulfill two conditions. If it says you have to do A and B, let's say CTH and 50% rule, you have to fulfill both. If there is no and between, the semicolon means an or. So the rule here is we have three alternatives. change of tariff subheading, a chemical reaction as a production process, or the 50% rule. And if you fulfill one of those, you're fine.
Yep.
So just as an answer, the semicolon is an or, an and is explicitly given in the list. And for export, I can only recommend this. Of course, here you really can, I just say back here and enter another product, let's say just something from the agricultural sector. And here again, I see the normal rate in the EU, the preferential duty, and my rules of origin. And here we see this here, provided that, and then you have several conditions which here are indeed cumulative. But here you can see that here is basically a list open. When you have a list, you have to fulfill the complete list.
Thank you. That's a great question. It was anonymous, but it was a great question. Another one, a large number of EU suppliers do not have an REX, a REX, and are simply quoting their ORI on the statement of origin. How do we evidence valid EU origin if EU suppliers do not have an REX?
So the ORI does not work, so it's simply not valid proof if they do so. If the shipment is below 6,000 euro, you don't need a number there, but then you should also not put an ORI in because then customs knows you haven't read the rules and don't understand them, or have read them and don't understand them. Unlike, and this is important to know, unlike the concept of the approved exporter, which is an authorization, you do apply for it, customs have to hand in documentation, which is then assessed by customs. So you in REX just apply for it. It's a 2-pager, and I would say will take you 15 minutes. It is like an application for an ORI. A European supplier who's not in the position to furnish you with a REX number should better recurse to domestic trade. And so get me right here. To have an approved exporter is effort. You have to apply for it, customs will check, you have to obtain the authorization, you have to maintain the authorization, and so on. REX basically means you register yourself in a database like you register for an ORI number. And yeah, you can very easily verify it. You just look up the REX database, whether the party is registered. And you should do this if you're not sure, because technically I can just tell you, hey, I'm a REX and my number is 7411. Or 4711, sorry. So then yeah, and especially in the beginning. And there's one thing for those companies who are really used to exporting to third countries in the EU, this shouldn't be any problem. We do have the REX already in GSP. We have it with Japan, with Canada, now introducing with some EPAs in Africa. So the concept is known. And again, the REX is a general registration. You register once for REX. If you're registered for GSP, then of course you don't have to re-register again. You just do it once. So you may reuse it then for the other agreements. So there's no way escaping REX unless you only receive shipments with a value below 5,700 pounds, corresponding to the 6,000 euro, depending on the exchange rate, of course.
Thank you, thank you. And we're getting a lot of people from the panel thanking you for staying on. So that's really appreciated. Thanks, Koja. Another question. What if the exporter from the EU is a UK company which is not established in the EU?
Plays no role. It is just a question where the goods do originate from. So you may, these are these principal toller models. So I may be the principal and let something produce in the EU, but it's produced by somebody in the EU. It's a EU production plant or facility which will produce goods which have an origin or not. The producer only will know, and the producer will state the origin if he can, either on a statement of origin, or if he hasn't achieved preferential origin, maybe on a supplier's declaration, a cross-border one. But the actual status of the company plays no role. It is just that a principal located outside may not made out a statement of origin. The statement of origin may only be made out by the person or the juridical person which is actually controlling the production.
Thank you. Going another anonymous, if we consider that our production processes exceed the minimal operations criteria, can we simply ignore the PSRO rules and declare all our products as UK origin, even where there is no change of tariff heading?
Interesting. Can you repeat the beginning, please?
If we consider that our production process exceeds the minimal operations criteria, can we simply ignore the PSRO rules and declare all our products as UK origin? As a question mark.
Yeah.
There is no charge of tariff heading.
No. Very sorry you said it was anonymous, huh?
Anonymous.
Okay, that's good. The question is posed wrongly. Here I can only answer, you must not ask the question this way. It will lead you to a wrong result. I said, when you only have materials which are already originating, you don't have to look into the PSR. So if you only produce from materials originating in the EU and in the UK, then under TCA, you don't have to look into the PSR anymore. But then these materials already are originating. If you then do more than a minimal operation, then you will always have a result. But the result, however, still is or will need to lead to UK origin. So you have to so formulating this differently. If you only produce from EU and UK materials and you do more than a minimal operation, then you will have a UK good. Point. If you, however, also employ materials which are not already originating, you have non-origin materials, you always have to look into the PSR. The order is different. So you have to secure that you do more than a minimal operation. Then you have UK origin, provided you have only EU and UK goods. If you have also non-originating materials, then the fact that you do more than a minimal operation allows you to consult the list, but you have to consult the list. The only case you don't have to consult the list is you have wholly obtained products and you have products which are materials, wholly obtained products and production from materials which are only from UK and EU. Then doing more than a minimal operation, you have a UK good. If non-originating goods are concerned, then you always have to consult the list. However, if you only do a minimal operation, you must not consult the list, no origin.
Thank you. I'm going to give you two because I think these are both the same. One is anonymous and one is from Margaret. Hopefully Margaret is still on. Please confirm if EUR1s are still required for EFTA countries. And then someone has asked, please can you cover repair goods again as per the question above, remembering goods were not shipped under repair regime as no export entry was required pre-Brexit.
I didn't get the second one. The first one is the EUR1.
If EUR1s are still
no. This I have. So the different FTAs do have different requirements as to the proofs of origin. So the EU progressively is going from certificates, meaning EO1, to self-certification. This means statements of origin, on origin. From a UK perspective, the UK to a large extent has replicated, and I think I have it somewhere here. I think it's here. So basically, the UK has replicated all agreements of the EU, with the exception to those 6 of them. So these are not replicated. The rest is fully replicated. So this means in the UK, you still use and receive EO1s, provided those are the proof of origin as being stipulated under those agreements. If Japan here, Japan is above, if Japan just says you need a statement of origin, you need this on origin. If you, for instance, with Tunisia or Switzerland still have EO1, you may use it. And you also still have the UMEAT. So the the UK has replicated. Until the UK gives it an own shape, you will have the same proofs of origin as under the EU agreements before. No change. It is just that with the new, the TCA is a complete new one. And this already followed the style of the new reformed regional convention, which goes to self-certification. Which it will this will retain the EO1 still, but sorry, I have to say this here, but from a general perspective, EU is moving from certificates to self-certification, and the UK replicating this then will have the same situation, with the mere exception that when the EU is applying the regs, the UK is using the EORI number, like for instance in the Canada agreement or in the Japan agreement.
Margaret is still on, so I'll repeat that the second question. Thank you, Margaret. Please, can we cover repair goods again as per thank you. Remembering goods were not shipped under a repair regime, as no export entry was required prior to Brexit.
That's but this is not only repair regime. There's a rule. Usually you cannot return goods when you haven't exported them before. There may be cases of returned goods which now come back to the UK. There's a covering rule on this. I would have to look up which is exactly, but you can still return goods to the EU which have not been exported before. So this is a provision which is independently from the repair regime. The new repair regime indeed means that you ship goods for repair, and they are duty-free on both sides when they enter being unrepaired and when they come back repaired. If you have returned goods, so this in a way eases. So you can just say, I do import these goods for repair, and then they are duty free. So you can bring them also into free circulation duty free. The returned one is different. You avoid the duties by proving again identity and non-manipulation, and it is possible. This was a corresponding request of the German business associations and of course of business associations of other countries, that it still would be possible to return goods which have been basically brought to the UK pre-Brexit, thus without an export.
Thank you, Koja. This is Tracy, from my friend from Norwich. I hope she's still on. And Tracy, no question is silly. I'm familiarizing myself with RGR, but am I right in assuming that by the nature of RGR, equivalence doesn't apply as it would under customs warehousing? There's a question mark there. Am I right in assuming that by nature of return of goods, equivalence doesn't apply as it would under customs warehousing? What if you only buy product A from a single EU supplier and the goods were in FC in the EU, and you import this product in multiple consignments into FC, into the UK, over a period of time? When you sell a single unaltered product, A, send to a customer in IE and or to another MS, to use RGR relief. I'm assuming that would have to link the actual items sent to the original import exporter from the EU.
Yeah.
Also,
No, exactly. Therefore, it does work in practice. This is, of course, the single item in our Percy Picks example would not necessarily be the single package of Percy Picks. But I suppose in the agricultural or in the food industries, they work with lots. You will have a container which has a lot, and the assumption is perfectly right. You have to prove that the lot is identical. So the return goods relief has never been intended for those cases. So this is really having, tangible goods which are not intended to stay in the importing country, or it turns out that they have to be returned because they are not fit for purpose whatsoever. So this is not an element of supply chain design. And you are right. If you have one machine, you can prove it. If you have multiple goods of different lots from different parties to different parties, this will not work, because you won't be in the position to prove the identity of the goods. Because the identity is on the level of the single product, which, however, in the food industry shall be rather a lot than the single package, I would say.
thank you, Koja. Isabel, UK-Turkey trade agreement says that products originating in any of the accumulating countries, UK, Turkey, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, EU, which do not undergo any processing in the UK, retain their origin. If exported into one of these countries, Article 3.1 on their origin rules, how should that be interpreted?
So it applies what is in the agreement. The agreement says you may do the diagonal accumulation here, and you may retain the origin. Just to be clear on one thing, if you retain goods, if you retain the origin and return the goods of the same origin, you have the same problem than in our Percy Picks example. So even with diagonal accumulation, if you just retain the origin and send them back into the country with the origin, you'll have the same problem. Diagonal accumulation is intended to accumulate with goods from one country in another country and export them in a third country. Therefore, it's called diagonal. So the critical point here, I would say, only is that those agreements the UK has replicated do actually have conditions for diagonal accumulation, and the condition is identical rules. And like the Swiss already have said, they don't consider the rules being identical, so you can't accumulate with EU materials towards Switzerland. So the Swiss authorities won't accept diagonal accumulation toward the UK. This was as if you know the old pan-Euro-meat matrix. This would be like you don't have a common entry with Switzerland and UK. How the Turkish authorities will behave here, no idea. But as long as the conditions which are laid down in the single agreements, which usually are, there is an agreement, there is mutual assistance, there is a corresponding notification, and so on. If this is fulfilled, no question, diagonal accumulation is possible. If it's not fulfilled, I would say it's at the discretion of the authorities of the importing country. And also of the partner country for import and export cases, because Switzerland says it wouldn't accept it. Switzerland will not accept accumulation with EU goods in the UK, and Switzerland will also not issue an EO1 or an EO meat for this case. So how Turkey behaves, no idea. But I would there's a by the way, Kevin, now we got a restriction. My device says it is lowing run on battery.
we are literally. I've got two more questions.
But okay. So I've still got. I got 9%. If I disappear, you know why. One general remark here. As there are uncertainties we're talking about. if you want to use preferences and you're not sure about the results here, also including diagonal accumulation, it would be smart to consider if you put back some money as just as a risk assurance. So if then everything goes smooth, you have made this cut, so to say, but then you are preserved. U.S. companies tend to do some hold back for risk in preferences, as they know that CVP can be very critical. Maybe this is a good approach also, not to already count with a preferential margin when you're not sure that you can realize it. You can try to realize it, but you should be saved if it doesn't work out. Maybe this is a more relaxed approach than just counting with it and afterward then being disappointed.
Thank you, and thank you as well. Hopefully that's answered your question. Two more, which I'll put into one because I think you can answer these. We have been advised, this is Sandra, thank you, Sandra. We have been advised that some EU customs, Croatia, Cyprus, and EU customers are rejecting the GB ORI as a legal registration in the UK. Is there an EU website where we can point them to confirm the GB ORI is acceptable? And then Margaret is also asking, how does the new repair regime work? Is there any info or website that we can be pointed to?
Second question first. I just wanted to highlight that there is a new repair regime, and people who will only look into the origin chapter will not find it because it's in the first chapter. It's in trading goods, and it also says it is positioned well here because it says that it is regardless of the origin. I found it an interesting and noteworthy feature of the agreement I wanted to share with you. I must confess I have not found any further information how this is actually carried out, but it is there, and then it will be, the agreement says it is there, it must be offered to you. So you have the regime. Technically, indeed, I could not point you, whilst I can point you apparently to a number of websites, which I also apparently do know and can navigate them. In this case, I can't.
Thank you.
It's completely new, so I don't know such a regime from other agreements. So, but it must be offered. What was the first one? The second one.
Certain countries in the EU.
Yeah, right. I know. This must be and bear with the Croatian colleagues. Sometimes the level. So. German customs and Dutch customs may react differently, just also from a competence level question than some Eastern European customs authorities. And again, this is not necessary, but you may have different reactions from customs authorities just because certain officers don't know. So I think two things are mixed up. In the statement of origin, you write your GB ORI. This GB ORI is the relevant information in the statement of origin. Nobody can deny it. Your GB ORI, however, is not valid anymore for any authorization in the EU you may hold as a UK company. So indeed, the validity of EORIs for UK companies has ceased, but not in the field here of preferential origin as an indication in the statement of origin. So I think officers may mix something up. And then sometimes this is not a joke. I mean this seriously. Sometimes sending across an extract of the law does help. So yeah. I know of cases where people then to customs authorities in certain European countries have just sent an extract of the UCC, the Union Customs Code, and just said, could you just read this and tell me why I'm mistaken here?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. German customs is a very strong authority with 40,000 employees. You may have smaller administrations in certain member states, and again, maybe not everybody will be in the same level then. But yeah. Then you can always rectify this by addressing it, and ideally addressing it by naming the law. And again, with a repair rule, I would just address customs and say, here's a repair rule in the agreement. I want to use it. What do I have to do? And technically also HMRC should be in the position to tell you how you do this, because when the goods come back to the UK, you also don't want to pay, because usually this would be, if it's not done under free circulation, this would be an outward processing, and you don't want to pay the duty on the difference of the value. Huh? You don't have to, because it's duty free. But again, there must be a process for this, and both HMRC and European customs authorities should know. But they take time. You know, we've got an origin information system in Germany. I haven't even found the information on the UK yet. So they will need their time to implement it. But if it's in the agreement, they can hardly deny it. So there will be an option.
But just saying, thank you for that, Koja. But the TCA doesn't confirm GB ORI is the authorization number. Thank you.
No. It does. Because it has a dynamic reference. It says that the registration number, as per the local regulations in the party, do apply. And in the EU, we have it's in our customs code that whenever there is an agreement and there is nothing specific in, then it's regs. So this is a dynamic hint to EU customs law. And in the UK, it is so simple. When the local regulations of the UK say it's the EORI, it is EORI. This is something the UK authorities do say. There's nothing to comment on by the Croatian authorities here. So if they would say it is, I don't know, the passport number of the chief of logistics, which would be in contrast to the GDPR, but this would be a UK rule. They have to accept it.
Yeah. Sandra's come back with some more information, but I think we'll try and take that sort of offline, because we've gone over the time. We've got a lot of people that have still stayed on. So on behalf of the Director General, Des, the ACITA committee, the members, we'd like to thank you, Koja, for a really, really fantastic morning, enlightening, informative, scary, everything of the above. Thank you for your time. You're a great friend of ACITA, and we appreciate all the time that you give us. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more questions coming in, and if you don't mind, if I can send those questions over and get them assigned on behalf of everyone at ACITA. Thank you.
What we could do, Kevin, thank you very much for the flowers and the positive feedback. What we could do indeed, it is all very new to everybody of us. So, and again, even customs websites apparently are not fully updated on this. So it may be worthwhile in a few months, I don't know, in the second quarter, maybe, or in the third, just to speak about the experiences we have made on both sides of the channel. And Kevin, maybe Marks and Spencer will have solved the PercyPix problem until then, and we can see how they did it. I believe not with returned goods.
Exactly. Otherwise, we'll all be suffering because we can't go without our PercyPix.
But I can only recommend the new Czech site. Here you have duties and rules of origin together. The PSR, of course. So this is basically the UK successor of A2M and MADB. Feel free to use this. We are the service provider here for DIT, and of course we are also happy to receive feedback on this. Okay.
Thank you, and again, thank you very much. We're getting a lot of comments coming through from the people that are still on, thanking you for an excellent presentation. We appreciate it. For those members that are still on, we're going to be doing another webinar on the 27th we're doing CDS refresh training on tariffs on the 27th, and that's run by the HMRC. And we have a TSS update on the 28th of Jan, and I will be sending out the invites for the TSS webinar in the next day or so. We will be putting this presentation on the website, so you can review it at your leisure. We will also be putting it on the ACITA YouTube channel as well. So again, thank you all for your attending. If you have any further questions, or I didn't get to some of your questions, I apologize. But thank you all. Thank you for your participation, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Can you put the video on, Kevin?
Yeah.